Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic.
I'm Barry P. Cook. I'm here to talk to you about the latest episode of She-Hulk. It was called Superhuman Law. And as it begins, Jen is scolding Blonsky for his breakout. And she's doing this at the prison where apparently he returned after his time away, as it were. But he says that Wong broke him out against his will, Wong, the Sorcerer Supreme. Then we get a fourth wall break where Jen explains that we're not going to get a cameo every week on the show, even though now, obviously, Wong's going to be in this episode, except for the ones that we're going to get every week. It turns out that Jen is making the news all over the place, and social media is abuzz over She-Hulk. And they actually went there. They actually goofed on the whole thing on social media where people keep being butthurt about female heroes and emasculated male heroes and all of that stuff, which is hilarious because that's exactly what's going on. At the end of the sequence, there's one kid that says, I don't know about you guys, but I'd totally smash, which is kind of funny because, you know, Hulk smash. Anyway, Jen is called into the office to consult on a case of her former coworker at the DA's office who was defrauded by a shape-shifting light elf from New Asgard, who made him think that she was Megan Thee Stallion and was dating him. But he decides he doesn't want to work with her, you know, with Jen. So he gets assigned to another lawyer, but not before Wong comes in through a sorcerer hole. I don't know what they're called, but that's what I'm calling it. And goes with Jen to her office to confirm that he indeed broke Blonsky out of jail against his will for his own purposes, at which point Jen tells him that he has to go to the parole board to testify that it's all his fault. And it was a pretty funny conversation, actually. One of the funnier moments of the show so far. Meanwhile, the other lawyer tries to get the details of the guy's case from him. And after he does, and the guy leaves, he comes back in saying that he wants to drop the case, but it turns out that he's not him. And he's instead the light elf trying to get the case dropped by impersonating him. But she gets discovered. At the Abomination's parole hearing, Wong is a no-show, so Jen does the best she can with her other witnesses who work at the prison and detail various ways in which Blonsky has changed his ways and become a good person and have even helped them and other prisoners in various ways, after which Wong eventually does show up. At a court hearing, the Light Elf's lawyer tries to get the case dismissed by saying that the defendant knew the whole time what was happening because they were actually engaged in a role play, but she absolutely gets destroyed by the Superhuman Division lawyer guy, and her motion is denied. But then the elf leaves the courtroom and comes back as the judge and tries to make it look like the judge is changing his ruling. But her own lawyer tells her she's committing a crime by impersonating a judge and tells her to get down off the bench, which she does. Blonsky, meanwhile, ends up changing into the Abomination in his cell to show the panel that he's not out of control even when he is the Abomination. Of course, everybody freaks out, but then he changes back, and the parole board says that they will consider his case and then reconvene. But they also tell Wong that he basically admitted to committing a crime, but then he just disappears through another sorcerer hole. He's basically like, I'm out, and he takes off. It was kind of funny. At the elf's actual trial, at the request of the other lawyer in the Superhuman Division, Jen testifies for her former coworker in the form of saying that, yeah, he's such a deluded, like, self-absorbed knucklehead that he might actually believe he was dating Megan Thee Stallion, who it turns out is in the gallery during the trial. And the judge rules in his favor based on the idea that he is, in fact, not a reasonable person and would, in fact, believe that he was dating Megan Thee Stallion, and that the defense's argument that no reasonable person could honestly have believed it is incorrect. Well, is correct, but but that it doesn't apply to him because he's not a reasonable person. So the judge rules in his favor, awarding him $175,000 and sentencing the elf to 60 days in jail for, you know, impersonating him, which Jen's coworker guy doesn't think is good enough, causing him to muse out loud that he wishes some way could be found to just keep her from ever shape-shifting again and fooling anyone, which reminds Jen of Bruce's inhibitor, which causes her to suggest to the parole board that Abomination be made to wear one as a condition of his parole in order to induce them to feel comfortable releasing him, which they do. Later, Jen is walking from her car at night and she's beset by a few thugs who seem to have robbed an Asgardian construction worker because they're using all these enchanted tools. And they attack her on the premise that they're doing it because she's been showboating her powers, which she denies. But it turns out that they were trying to get her blood or something for someone who hired them to get it, which didn't work because the needle wouldn't penetrate her skin after she turned into She-Hulk. And that's where the episode ends, at least the pre-credit part of the episode. In a post-credit scene or a mid-credit scene, Jen actually signs Megan Thee Stallion as a new client, and they twerk and dance around a little bit in the office, which was hilarious, and which was noticed by Jen's boss, who just kind of chuckles and carries on with his day. So yeah, it was yet another goofy post-credit scene, but that's okay. Actually, I like this episode quite a bit. I think it was the best episode so far in terms of humor and interesting plot. It showed us more about the Superhuman Law Division and what it does, and we got to see a white male lawyer who was a decent guy win a case against a female lawyer with a female client who was a bad person, which I think helps balance the scales a little bit against some of the anti-man stuff we've been seeing in the first two episodes, which, you know, I've been saying since the beginning they need to do if they don't want people to, you know, keep seeing the show as nothing but a man bashing fest. So it was good to see that. Hopefully that will put the anti-woke critic crowd on their heels a little bit. We got to see Jen actually argue a case, which she wasn't able to do entirely smoothly because of various difficulties, not the least of which was Abomination changing into Abomination, which almost blew her case completely up, but which interestingly didn't cause her to change into She-Hulk, even though she was at the very least agitated and at one point seemingly angry at, you know, Blonsky. She was like, change back now, you stop that, you need to change back now. And so why didn't she change into She-Hulk? I guess maybe because she's able to control her anger, like she was telling Bruce. I don't know. Anyway, I noticed that. We got to see Blonsky's 7 soulmates that he's been talking about. They were there at the parole hearing, and it turns out he met them as part of the prison pen pal program. They're there to support him at the hearing, and they're going to financially support him when he gets out. And they appear to be members of some kind of weird lady cult. So it was kind of funny. I suspect that's going to be something that we're going to get some humor from during the rest of the season. The guy that plays Blonsky is excellent. And of course, TATIANA MASLANY is excellent. So I really like this episode. Now, I want to talk about the Wong thing because it's causing a little bit of confusion. In Shang-Chi and the Ten Ring, there's a scene at like an underground fight club involving Wong and the Abomination. And that scene obviously then takes place during the events of She-Hulk, after the point at which Bruce says his arm is completely healed. But it's kind of like a bit of a retcon because at the, I think it's the end of Shang-Chi, we see Bruce still wearing the sling. So if the Fight Club event happened after the point at which his arm was completely healed, which we saw at the beginning of this season, how is it that at the end of that movie, which came out before this, obviously, his arm is still in a sling? So what's going on there? I hope they say something about that. Otherwise, the best I could come up with is he thought it was more healed than it was because he was in Hulk form and it seemed healed, but then when he turned back, it wasn't quite healed. Something like that. But yeah, otherwise it's a bit of a plot hole and people are kind of like freaking out about it, it would seem. But anyway, I don't know. I don't think it's that big a deal. But yeah, it's a bit of a head scratcher there. So anyway, I like this episode quite a bit. As I said, I think it's the best episode so far, and I'm looking forward to next week. I'm going to get out of here for now. I shall return with my review of episode 4 once it's released. Until then, my friends, I wish you peace and long life.